Good morning, Richard Casey. It's Gil Wright, an Army helicopter pilot for many years. But we want to hear about your Coast Guard career.
Well, I'm Richard Casey, Dick Casey, from the beginning.
You started out as a seaman and became a lieutenant colonel?
Yes. I was a seaman recruit, and I was retired as a commander. Yeah, same thing as a lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about your family and what got you interested in the Coast Guard.
Well, I grew up in Salem, Massachusetts, and in school I had always intended to join the Marine Corps. That was inbred since the time I was a little guy. Came home, my dad came home from the Second World War, 1945, and there was a parades, and the patriotic theme of the world seemed to be around the returning people. It was exciting, and he was come back into great shape. I admired him, and I admired everything about that time of year. And so all through school, I had intended to enlist in the Marine Corps when I graduated from high school. And I had been involved in drum corps, so I was marching, and so I was a little familiar with the attitude and the aspect of the military marching system. And so it came time to graduated from high school, and was down in Salem Common playing cards with some guys, and Ron Smigala and Bernie Bates walked by, and I said, "Hey, where you guys going?" And we had always heard a little bit about the Coast Guard, but not much. They said, "We're going down to sign up for the Coast Guard." I had known that there was a 6-month program. You go into a boot camp in the schools. So 6 months later, you're that was for active duty, and then you come back home, and for the next 5 years, you go to weekly meetings. So that was my introduction to the Coast Guard. That was in the middle of August, the 22nd of October, 1958. I was off to boot camp. The three of us took trains to New York, and then down, the Coast Guard arranged everything, down to Cape May, New Jersey, the very southern tip of New Jersey. I'm thinking to myself, this is all right. Here it is in the middle of October. I'm going south for the winter.
Yes.
Well, I can tell you one thing. It ain't warm down there in southern New Jersey, especially in the wintertime. But anyway, it was a good experience. The boot camp was 13 weeks of hard labor is what it's like. And interesting parts of it were the week number 9, I think it was small boat training. Well, the small boat was not in a motorboat, it was in a rowboat, a big rowboat with 10 places for the rowers to sit, and there was a coxswain in the back. And so it was early in the morning, like 5 o'clock, I think. We got us up and we marched down to the boat docks. And so marching down to the boat docks, and it had snowed. So we get down to the boat docks. First we got to clear the snow off the boats, and clear the snow off the oars, big oars. So each of us had one oar. So there was a guy on the other side. And so these boats were the ones that it was a dory, like back in the days of the early Coast Guard rescues. These lifeboat stations had crews that would, on a report, go out and try to save the people who were being battered by the waves. And so the Coast Guard guys would tow this with big wheels on this dolly thing, and then the boats would be cradled in the middle of these two big wheels, and they'd tow them down to the beach, up over the dunes and down to the shore, and they'd put into the water and to the point where the boats can now float. Now the boat, another part of the crew takes the dollies away, and the boat crew jump into the boat, and the bosun mate is in the stern hollering out orders. Everybody gets in the boat, and they all start rowing toward whatever the distress is. And they rescue the people. And
so you had to burst through the waves?
Crash through the waves. Yeah, that's the idea. I was exposed because I grew up in the Northeast. That's where, down at Cape Cod and out on the shores, there was a lot of sand. And so that was it. You had to make your way into the water through the surf. Hopefully it's not too hard, I guess. But for us, right then in the boot camp, it was a matter of rowing around the bay, and that was our introduction to and our training in the lifeboat.
Did your teamwork keep you straight, or was one guy pulling real hard?
He was always screwing up.
Would the coxswain be yelling stroke, stroke, or bail, or something?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what they did. And it was mostly learning how to together row, feather the oars when it was time to do that, and then pull when it's time, and then he would do most of the steering back there. It was exciting. And then we would put the boats up at the conclusion of this training and march back to the chow hall for breakfast. So you already spent an hour working your butt off, and now you're having a breakfast.
Hungry for that. Did you ever go out in that large Coast Guard schooner that I've seen photographs of?
No.
Tall ship of sorts that some...
The Eagle? Yes, Coast Guard Cutter Eagle. No, we never did that. We spent our 13 weeks in training, and then still in Cape May was Coast Guard Cutter Unimac, which was a weather cutter. It was 310 feet long, and there was a fleet of these weather ships in the Coast Guard.
Would that have been similar to that?
That's yes. That one is the
300 feet, that's to me a large boat.
Yeah, that's 311 feet, and it was the Coast Guard cutter Barataria was up in Portland, Maine.
What was your initial duty, or was this only for the training? Later you went out in the ocean and ships. What was your duty there?
I was a seaman, but during the 6-month period, it was all training to become a seaman, a qualified seaman with 3 stripes on your little arm. But part of the training was going on the Unimac, which was that same kind of a class of a vessel. It was tied up in New Jersey. And so we were all assigned different duties. Line handlers was where I was, and it was some of it was pretty exciting. I can give you an example. Part of that, we were on the Unimac for a month, and we sailed up the river. I'm not even sure what river it was, but it goes up to Philadelphia. Maybe it was the Philadelphia River. But the situation was that the tide was going down and the current was going out of the bay and out of the rivers. The captain was in a situation where he had to get up the river against the current and then pull into a dock on the port side. My line was in the midship, so they have a bow line and a stern line, and then they have what they call spring lines to be tied up, and they maneuver the ship a little bit with the ability to tow, pull in or release these lines in the middle. Well, the captain went up the river and tried to get in, and by the time he got it pointed around to the point he could get in, he was pulled back so far he had to get back into the river because it was so strong. Well, he was determined we were going to go into that little spot. So he goes up and up and up, and they throw the monkey fist, which is a ball, heavy ball, was tied to the hawser. Now the ropes that you use, they're not called ropes anymore, they're hawsers. They're about that big around. They're big. And anyway, the intent was to get that middle line onto the ship and onto the dock, and he would then use that as a spring line and spring around and hold that thing tight on the ballad on the dock. Well, that was working fine, except that we were still going out. The current was still coming out the river, but we was down by where the hawser had come through the opening on the side of the ship and tied up to the big bollard on the ship. Well, that rope was really straining. It was going pulling, and I watched this thing go from this big down to this big. So we're going pulling a lot of strain on that thing, and they said, "Get the heck out of there!" So right about that time, this thing exploded. I never thought that the ship, that a line like that would explode, but it was an explosion. Anyway, quite an experience.
And it came back towards you,
yeah.
And then the boat fell away from the dock?
Yeah. But he finally made it in. But in doing so, the current was still pushing him, and he was determined to get around that corner, and the ship went up against the dock and went, and well, that was the ship being crushed on the side. Didn't know how much damage was done, but down in the cruise mess deck, the hull had been pushed in about that far, and the deck was like this. It was very eye-opening for a little new seaman.
Yeah.
To get out of the way.
The hazards quickly learned.
That's not, yeah. So anyway, that was part of that training. The rest of the 6 months was not as exciting as the Unimac. So anyway, back in Salem, Massachusetts, and we're on the weekly meetings, and it was fine. But Joan and I were serious about getting married. We wanted to have a future that we enjoyed. And I looked and I said, I did not enjoy where I was working, and the future didn't look terribly exciting. So I thought, what do you think, Joni? We go in the Coast Guard and spend 4 years anyway, and give us time to settle in and see what the heck we want. It appealed to her. And so I did just that. Signed up for 4 years. We got married, and I was assigned to the Coast Guard cutter Barataria, which was the same class ship as the Unimac, and it was in Portland, Maine. Now, its mission was to do weather patrols. Weather patrol being the ship goes out into the middle of the Atlantic. Now, I'd always heard that the Coast Guard was shallow water sailors. This was not shallow water. But anyway, the stations that we would go out to, one was right between Labrador and Greenland. The next one was 500 miles south of Greenland, and the fourth one was down south of that, but it was Bermuda. It goes 600 miles east of Bermuda, and that's where that station was. The ship for 1 month would have to stay in this 10-mile by 10-mile block, and the objective of it was to provide navigation help to the planes. The commercial planes were going overhead across from Europe over to the U.S. And that worked fine until the people flying the planes overhead were more accurate in their positioning than we were down on the sea. So they could actually tell us where we were instead of us telling them where they were.
It was too deep to anchor. 2,000 feet or something?
Oh gosh, more. You don't even know where.
So you had to be underway all the time.
Oh.
And if it was rough, then you were into the waves, I suppose.
Oh yeah. It was exciting. But while we was on while we were at sea, the normal duty section for us seamen people was on a cycle of, I think it was 6 hours on and 12 hours off or something like that. And there was a messenger, a helmsman, and one fellow was on the bridge. Actually, it's above the bridge, on the flying bridge.
Show me on that picture where those places are.
Yeah.
Raise it up a little bit higher. Yeah,
okay.
Good.
This is the bridge here, and the flying bridge was up on top of that.
Okay.
As you can imagine, this is a 5-inch gun down here. We use it occasionally. But anyway, this 300-foot vessel was in the seas. I was on the flying bridge and looking up on both sides, and it looked like mountains over there. But it was fun. I really enjoyed it. This thing crashing down, and the bow would go down into the solid blue water, and the water would come up over the gun. It never came up far enough, and the spray came out all over me. But that was okay, because I was having a good time. But I'm not sure what I was looking out for. Maybe for my own survival. But that was it was pretty rough down on the bridge, because the officer of the day came out and over to the wing of the bridge down below me, and he looked up and said, he forgot I was up there. He said, "What are you doing up there? Get the heck out of there."
I've been here for 6 hours, sir.
Anyway, that's what we did, and we painted the sides of the ship while we were out having a good time. And that was my baratariat time. But I had applied for electronics school when I went in, and during about 2 months later, I was admitted to ET school, which was a 4-month training for electronics. And so that's where I spent the next 4 months, and then I was, at that point, graduated from the ET school. I was made an ET3, an eagle on my shirt with a 1 stripe underneath of it.
Show your boot camp picture there.
Oh yeah, that's
with no stripes.
With no stripes.
Well, I guess you have a stripe, don't you?
Yeah, 2 little ones,
Oh,
but
okay.
I really didn't earn that one. There was only 1 little one, because I was a seaman recruit. I was only 18 years old, 20 years old, 18 years old.
Hold that up a little flatter on it. Now lean it towards me. There you go. Look at that young guy.
Hey.
All right. Not a lot of change. Still got the same
Yeah.
chin.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, that's pretty nice. That's that hat is referred to as a Dixie cup. This is what when I checked in at boot camp, this was the hat that they issued to me. But they don't use these anymore. They didn't use them back at that time either. These are the ones that when you see the old movies, this is what you see them wearing. And this is what I was issued.
Boot camp.
Boot camp. But anyway, yeah, no, ultimately I think they went back to a hat kind of like that years later. After the ET school, I was given orders to the Escanaba out of New Bedford, Mass. It's also a weather cutter. So I just continued back in the, this was in 1960.
Do you recall any of your instructors during that early training?
I do. One of them was particularly helpful to me. He said, "Casey, you ain't gonna make it to this school unless you do something." And I thought, well, I gotta do something, because I didn't want to go back and just be a bosun mate or something. So when the taps occurred at 10 o'clock at night, I studied just like everybody else, but he said, "You better get going on it." I go to sleep, we'll go to bed, and then the taps, and get up and spend 2 hours in the bathroom, in the head, studying. And I ended up a good deal ahead of a lot of the people in the class.
My high school buddy remembers his boot camp instructor by name and everything they said. I don't remember any of those people. You know, I remember the times and the attitudes.
Yeah. I appreciated what he did. Anyway, at Escanaba, back on the weather trips that probably made, well, did it every third month. We spent a month out in the middle of the ocean. But one of these periods of time of training, the ship underwent training, and it was down in Cuba. And it was in Guantanamo Bay. And we were there in October of 1962. And if you remember what happened, there was a missile crisis. No, missile crisis.
Aye.
Yeah. So everybody were frantic about what do we do. And we couldn't do anything. We did what the orders that came down to the ship. So we were ordered to get back up to where our port was up in Massachusetts. But we did do training with the ship, and it was exciting also. But anyway, not long after that, it seems to me, that was the January of '63, I was given orders to a Loran station. Loran is a navigation system that was developed in the World War II. And it's a transmitter site which sends out a pulse, and they send out a pulse to your station. There was another station that may have been 1,000 miles away, and they receive my pulse, and then they wait so many microseconds, and then they send a pulse. Well, this method, they developed a way to have lines on a chart which respond to the difference in time that you receive these pulses. So you being on the ship, you get the chart out that has that particular parabola for the reception of the signal, and you can find a line that you're on. You change your frequency on the radio. You pick up two other sets of transmitted signals, and where those two lines cross, that's where you are. So that was quite interesting, and our job was to keep those machines and the radars and the radios and sonars working. So I did that, and I was very happy doing that. They sent me over to Spain for 1 year. I was in very, very northwest corner of Spain. You could not get any further northwest in Spain than I was. It was right on the edge. I could show you a picture, but it's kind of hard to see. This is the little station. There's a cliff right there.
Oh.
That's the ocean. And these little buildings here, they were, the little old people would carry these bundles of grass and stuff down to these mills. They thought they were mills. Mills were built by the Romans. That's been there for a while. Anyway, we spent a year on that little post.
Sending the signal out.
Yeah.
And you were, Joni stayed back in the States, in Massachusetts?
Sure, Joni stayed back here in the States, and the day I checked in to the station, Joni had our second child. So she had to stay home and take care of a 1-year-old and a brand new one for a year. Fortunately, our family was nearby, and they were more than willing to take care of her. And she was very happy about it.
You ended up with 3 children?
Yeah, I have a daughter after that. Yeah, so that was my second son. So we get back together at one thing happened there too. With November of '63, John Kennedy was killed, was shot, and I was amazed at the citizens of Spain, way up in the area where we were. They were devastated. It was like it was their president who had been shot. They were so hurt. I was very impressed with their reactions. Anyway, so I get back home in June of '64, and I decided I didn't want to stay in the Coast Guard. So I got out and went back to Salem and back to trying to establish a career field and a career pattern and a career future. And I never felt totally comfortable in any one of them. I really missed the Coast Guard. The camaraderie was something that was very strong in my inner feelings. I liked it. So I said, Joni, what do you think about going back in the Coast Guard? She said, sure. So the first thing I did was apply for OCS because I didn't want to stay enlisted. And not long after that, I was accepted into OCS, and I was supposed to, after spending 3 or 4 months in Boston repairing radios and stuff, lighthouses and whatever, went to Yorktown, Virginia for OCS. That was exciting. It was just like going back into boot camp, which was fine.
When did you decide that aviation was important?
Well, OCS was just like boot camp, but doing a lot more studying. And out of OCS, they had an opportunity to apply for whatever you wanted to do next, and I had already found that I wanted to investigate going into flight school. And it turns out that 1964, when I went back into the Coast Guard, the airlines were hiring, and so a lot of the pilots in the Coast Guard were getting out of the Coast Guard to go to the airlines to make more money. Well, it's made a lot of openings in the Coast Guard aviation field. So I said, I'll put in for that, and they said, you got it. So for the next year and a half, I was in Pensacola.
So in Pensacola, you learned airplanes first and then went to helicopters?
Yeah, flew the T-34, which was a small single engine. You do solo flights in that, which was scary, but you did it anyway because everyone else did it. And then the T-28, which is a big plane, big so that I realized how big it was when you're sitting in the pilot seat and you put the power to the wall on takeoff, and then you release your brakes. That thing pushed your head back so hard. I said, "Wow, this thing is like a fireball." But it was good. It was a lot of great training.
2 crew in that one?
Just you.
No instructor?
Only the instructor there's a back seat, but
Okay.
oftentimes he was not there. But by this time you're pretty good.
Okay.
A lot of they do instrument training, formation training, and it was exciting.
So that led you into helicopter training?
Yeah, right after that, we were straight into helicopter training in Pensacola with the Navy. And then I still wasn't qualified in the Coast Guard helicopters because they have their own training here in Mobile, Alabama.
These two helicopters, this helicopter is probably later on, or was that early on? Oh, we stationed a ship.
No, I did hundreds and hundreds of those hoists, but before I got to that big helicopter, that's an H-3. But I was on an H-52, and they don't have a picture of the H-52. But it was a single engine H-52, and we trained in Mobile. Mobile had a training center, and it's still here today, and it still operates. Because every pilot in the Coast Guard has to come to Mobile once a year for refresher, to get the instrument training, and it's in a simulator. So we have been around the Coast Guard in Mobile for quite some time. Since the first time I was there was in 1969. Is that right?
Was that a full motion with visuals simulator?
Oh yeah.
It was our first simulator. You had no windows, totally instruments, but it had axis.
Yeah.
And when Blackhawk came, that was UH-1 Huey.
Yeah.
When Blackhawk came, then we had visuals.
We didn't have visual. So, electronic, you gotta buy 2 pilots. He may have come from someplace on the West Coast. And so you're together for 1 week, and the guy in the back is an instructor, and he programs the daily flights for you.
Constant emergency procedures?
Oh my God, always. And there was a Ellison Field in Pensacola with initial training in the helicopters, and then we're assigned back into the Coast Guard, and I was assigned to Coast Guard Air Station Salem, which is my hometown. So that was pretty awesome. I was a helicopter pilot, but I could not fly as a pilot. I could fly as a pilot, but only a trainee in the helicopter that the Coast Guard had, until I went down to Mobile for our initial training. So I came to Mobile for, I think it was 2 months, for the period that we had to go through the instruction on the H-52. And back to Salem, and we did search and rescue. Every 3rd day you had duty. You come into work every day, but every 3rd day you would spend the night with 5 pilots on ready call. At that point I was qualified as a co-pilot, and so we did a lot of training, a lot of hoists, a lot of extended searches for overdue boats, whatever.
So you were on standby for a day and a half or 2,
Yeah.
expecting to get called out for rescue. If not, you went out and did some training.
Yeah. We didn't fly the helicopters. Oh, when we weren't flying the helicopters, we could do. At Salem, there was we had no runway, but we had seaplanes that were on scene, and the seaplanes pilots would have to fly out, and one of the things they did was monitor the fishing vessels out in the Grand Banks. So they needed extra people on board for. That was a long time. That's a new one.
So these are older than that and
Yeah.
more rickety.
Yeah. So anyway, Salem, I was in Salem until 69. 69, I was transferred. They gave me an option. They said, would you like to go to Vietnam, or would you like to go to icebreakers? I'm thinking to myself, that's a pretty easy question. And I got a pretty easy answer. Icebreakers. So at that time, what the Coast Guard people did, they had, I think all through the Vietnam War era was 5 Coast Guard helicopter pilots would transfer into the Air Force, and the Air Force would send their pilots back to the Coast Guard. But it was an experience that I was glad I didn't have to do. That we lost one of the pilots over there, that was all. But my time on the icebreakers was exciting. I had an opportunity to put in for, or apply for, to go to South Pole. The icebreaker section in Mobile was broken into a group that you were, your mission, you would have 4 pilots and I think it's 20 crewmen, and you're attached to the icebreaker now, which icebreaker. This is an icebreaker. It's icebreaker, wind class icebreaker. There's a hangar back here. There's a telescoping hangar. You come in with a H-52 and you fly in and you land on the fantail. And so there's 2 of you. You don't come in together. You come in and they it's parked in a situation where you can get the second airplane in also. And then the blades, there's 3 blades, they disconnect them and pull them back and cradle them so that they can then tow the 2 aircraft around and put them inside a position right there where they will be hangared. The hangar then is slid back over the deck, and then the back door slides down, so it's all enclosed. And so you go on an icebreaker for 3 months to 5 months. This one was the first one I went on, was in Seattle, the North Wind, and it was to get underway in 1st of January, sometime right in the first week or 2, and sail for 3 months in the winter up there. So we get underway and have scientists with us. The scientists would work for, or they wouldn't work for, the National Science Foundation had the opportunity to put scientists with the ship and the helicopters, so the scientists could do whatever program that they had applied for. They had their specific mission, and we would try to accommodate that mission. If they had to site at the outflow of a river, or whatever they had to do with to gather information, we would provide a platform for that. So we get the helicopter on the ship, and the scientists on the ship, everybody settled in, and the ship would get underway and head out to do the mission. It's,
So that was on Western Alaska or up further up north?
This one was in Alaska, and Seattle. Went up through the Kodiak into the Sonderstrom Fjord, which is a beautiful, beautiful river, huge river that goes up into the heart of Greenland from the seas. But that was all on the way to Thule, Greenland. It was an Air Force base that we worked out of. One of the things the captain wanted to do was have a change of command for himself, which was going to take place in the middle of this mission. But he wanted to make it the furthest, most north change of command anyone has ever had. So that was his intent, and so that was our mission, or at least part of it. We went. He was to pick up an admiral in Thule and get underway, and then the admiral would be with us while we sailed north another day, and then have the change of command so he could say it was the most further north of any change of command ever. And so before the admiral was able to come on board, we were out to sea, and of course in the summertime you get daylight almost all the time, so you could paint almost all the time. So he wanted to have a sharp ship, and everything was painted fresh. And so, of course, we didn't paint, but most of the crew did. And we're out steaming, and it was foggy, foggier than I expected it might be. We were not flying that day for some reason. And toward the end of the day, everybody was just getting down to have just had dinner, and was sitting around the wardroom and different places on the ship. And all of a sudden, we came to a stop. It was just, and that's what it felt like. It felt like just a soft boom. And well, all the chairs went topsy-turvy. 5 guys falling out of chairs. And we got back up on our feet, ran outside, and you look up through the fog, and there's a mountainous iceberg in front of us that we had just hit with nose first right into the iceberg, and we slid up the side of it and then back down. Well, it didn't hurt the ship any, we thought. And so, but it was time to go home. So we headed back to Thule. The admiral was going to be coming in sometime soon. And the idea was, as I said, take the admiral up with a change of command. So we get back to Thule, tied up on the deck, on the dock. It was then that when we get off the ship, walked up the dock, everybody, including the captain, turned around and saw the front of the ship, the bow. And it looked like somebody had punched it in the nose. It was, the steel in the front of that ship is 18 inches thick. 18 inches thick. And it just pushed that thing back about, looked to be, all I had to do was have 6 inches, but it really looked like a little pig. And so Captain Stuma said, I got an idea. So they got underway, pulled it out into the seaway, and backed it in, so that when the admiral comes down the dock, he's not going to see that bullnose pushed back in like that. That was funny. So Admiral arrives, and we get underway and head north. It's quite a ways up. The furthermost north station around is Alert Station. It's a Canadian station. It's way up there. We passed Alert Station on our way to the point where we were going to make our stand, and that's where we had our change of command up there. Everybody was all dressed up. That was why that picture was taken with everybody in dress blue. That's why everybody's in dress blues.
And that was in the hangar on the back of the ship.
Yeah. Yeah. This picture shows the hangar itself, and the helicopter's backed in. That one's straight in. This one is backed in, with the blades folded. And now they're gonna. The hangar will telescope out this way, and then the front door will close.
Well, the Navy has brown flight jackets, and does the Coast Guard have for officers have brown?
It's all leather. We always use Navy items.
Yeah, it's possible that the Air Force has black ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was thinking that the pilots had those fancy jackets, and the others had just jackets.
Yeah. They're all the same leather jacket. Nice jacket. I lost mine somewhere. Well, I was in Puerto Rico from. I went from icebreakers to St. Petersburg, Florida, and flying the H-3, and then from St. Petersburg down to Puerto Rico. I was down there for 3 years also, and the number of search and rescue cases was quite dramatic. Down in Puerto Rico, we did a lot of long-range search and rescue. One of the interesting ones I had was it was a seagoing tug that was coming back into it was in a stormy night. Big swells, much bigger than the swells you see on that picture. But he came in, and there's not a jetty, but it's underground, underwater channel. And this captain of this particular vessel was unable to navigate into it, and I guess the swells coming from the stern pushed him to one side, and it pushed him out of the channel, and he went aground. And that would have been not that terrible, except that he had this huge swells coming in from behind him. So it would lift him up and twist him a little bit and put him back down, pound him back down. And the swells kept coming, and there were 19 people on board that thing. And it was about heading up toward the rocks. But you can imagine the vessel coming in, and most of the crew was on deck, not wanting to be inside in case something bad happened, which was about to occur if the rocks were not far from them. The swell would lift them up off the rocks, blow them one way or another, and pluck them back down, and this thing was swinging wildly left to right. You can imagine trying to make a hoist off of the stern on this Gelderling. The back part here is where everyone was accumulated, and this thing is going boom, boom.
Yeah.
As the swells come in behind them and twist them around and go boom. And so we can only put about 10 people on that helicopter before we overload. So just to 10 people. It wasn't that far from the airport, but we had to drop them off at the airport and come back out and pick up the rest of them. But it all worked out fine. Everybody was safe, and everybody went home.
Did the boat sink?
Boat sunk. It didn't sink. It was on the sand.
On the rocks?
Yeah.
Sand.
Yeah.
Oh, on sand. Okay, good.
Yeah, but they had to take it all apart and
Bring it out.
recover it. Yeah. Yeah. It was.
Well, that's a long and exciting career in aviation and rescue.
Yeah. I'm sorry I couldn't. On the way back from one of these trips, I was past Arecibo, little village on the way back to our home port. Found out that there was a boat that had overturned, and it was a Hobie cat. And we flew by it to look and see what it was, and there was, in fact, an overturned Hobie. There were two young people on it. One thing that they didn't know that I could see was there was a shark going around that boat that was at least as long as, or looked up to me to be at least as long as the Hobie cat.
It's 17, 18 feet.
Those looked very big to me.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if I go down there and hover, somebody's going to jump in the water, and that's not good because they don't know it's there to help the shark. So we had decided we land right nearby was a field, and we had the crewman go over and talk to a local fisherman and explain the situation, have them go out with the fishing boat, pick those guys up, and that's what they did, and it was a success. Nobody got hurt, and that's the kind of thing I liked.
Yeah, yes.
So anyway.
Well, from that experience, did you, that kind of formed your personality and all and carried into their retirement life? And you still watch the weather and the water frequently and keep up with all that?
I do. I think there was the end of our career, we were looking for something to do next, and I thought I'd like to do something with Habitat for Humanity and getting to the house building thing. So we did that. I went to school in the College of the Redwoods out in California to learn how to build. It was a construction technology. So when we moved back, I still had a house in Cape Cod, and we moved back there in '91, and I became involved with Habitat, and for the next 15 years we spent a good deal of our time working, planning, talking to groups, and it was quite rewarding.
Well, Commander Casey, we appreciate your story and your service and subsequent service to the nation through Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you very much.